You know what's strange about being a dog? Humans think we only understand simple things, food, walks, belly rubs. But we see everything they hide from each other. I'm Bruno, and for 273 nights, I've watched Walter do the exact same thing. At exactly 9:47 p.m., he presses play on that old cassette player. Margaret's voice fills the room, reading poetry she recorded years ago. And every single night, Walter's whole body trembles like a leaf in a storm. But not one tear falls from his eyes. Here's what puzzles me most. Humans cry when they stub their toe, when they watch sad movies, even when they're happy. So why won't Walter cry when his heart is breaking so loudly I can hear it from across the room? I've been thinking about this mystery for months. What could make a human's eyes stay dry when their soul is drowning? What secret are they keeping from the world? And from themselves? What would you do if you witnessed someone carrying a weight so heavy, yet refusing to let it fall? But to understand Walter's silence, you need to know what our world sounded like when it was full of music, laughter, and the gentle rustle of turning pages. Let me take you back to before the quiet settled in like winter frost. I am Bruno, a 12-year-old golden retriever, and this farmhouse at the end of Maple Creek Road has been my world since I was 8 weeks old. Walter found me at the shelter the same week he and Margaret celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. A companion for our golden years, Margaret had said, scratching behind my ears with hands that smelled like vanilla and lavender. Walter is 68 now, a retired carpenter whose hands still carry the memory of every piece of wood he's ever shaped. Before the accident, those hands would stroke my fur while he and Margaret sat on the porch swing, planning their vegetable garden or debating which grandchild would visit next summer. Margaret would read aloud from her poetry books while Walter whittled small animals from oak scraps. Horses for their grandson Tommy, birds for little Sarah. Our days had rhythm. Walter would wake at sunrise, let me out to chase rabbits I'd never catch, then start coffee strong enough to wake the county. Margaret would join us in the kitchen, humming while she made breakfast, always saving me the last bite of her toast with honey. After breakfast, Walter would tend his workshop while Margaret and I walked the property line, her pointing out which flowers were blooming, me pretending to listen while actually tracking interesting scents. Evenings were sacred. The three of us would gather in the living room, Walter in his brown leather recliner, Margaret in her blue velvet armchair, and me sprawled across the braided rug between them. She'd read poetry while he worked on his carvings, and I'd drift between sleep and contentment, lulled by the sound of her voice and the gentle scraping of his knife against wood. The house breathed with warmth then. Laughter echoed from the kitchen. The phone rang with calls from their 3 children scattered across different states. Sunday dinners filled every chair around the dining table. I learned to read Walter's moods through subtle signs. The way he'd tap his fingers when thinking, how his breathing deepened when content, the particular whistle he'd use when calling me in from the yard. And Margaret. She was like sunlight, making everything brighter just by being present. Have you ever lived in a home where love was so present you could feel it in the walls themselves? For 11 years, that was our life. Perfect in its simplicity, rich in its routine. Then came that Tuesday in March when everything shattered like ice on a pond. It started with a phone call at 2:17 p.m. I know because I was lying in my favorite spot by the window, watching Margaret's car disappear down the driveway. She'd kissed Walter goodbye, promised to pick up his prescription and groceries, said she'd be back by 4 for our evening walk. The phone's shrill ring cut through the afternoon quiet. Walter answered on the 3rd ring, his voice casual. "Hello, Brennan residence." Then silence, but not the comfortable kind I knew. This silence felt sharp, dangerous. "What hospital?" His voice cracked like old wood under pressure. I watched him write something on the notepad by the phone, his carpenter's hands shaking so badly the pencil slipped twice. He hung up, stared at the paper, then looked at me with eyes I'd never seen before. Hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made them Walter. "Come on, Bruno. We need to go." The drive to County General blurred past in a haze of antiseptic smells and hurried footsteps. Walter's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. In the waiting room, he sat rigid while I pressed against his legs, trying to absorb some of his trembling. A young doctor with kind eyes delivered words that would haunt our house forever. "Massive internal bleeding. Did everything we could. So sorry for your loss." Walter nodded once, said thank you, signed papers with a steady hand, made phone calls to their children with a voice that barely wavered. He was a rock, solid and unmoving, but I smelled the salt of unshed tears on his skin. The funeral filled our small church to overflowing. Walter stood at the podium, eulogizing his wife of 43 years with words so beautiful even the pastor wiped his eyes. He greeted every mourner, thanked them for coming, accepted casseroles and condolences with equal grace. "He's handling it so well," I heard Margaret's sister whisper. "So strong. If only they could smell what I smelled." The scent of grief so thick it clung to his clothes, his skin, his very breath. After everyone left, Walter sat in Margaret's blue chair for the first time. He picked up her poetry book, the one with pages soft from countless readings, and opened to her favorite poem. But instead of reading aloud, he just sat there, turning pages without seeing them. That night, I heard him moving around at 2 a.m. from my bed by the kitchen door. I watched him set up the old cassette player Margaret had used to record herself reading poetry for a literary club meeting years ago. He'd saved those tapes, kept them in a shoebox in the closet. At 9:47 p.m. the next evening, Walter sat in his recliner, pressed play, and listened to Margaret's voice fill our too-quiet house. Her recorded words about love and loss and the beauty of ordinary moments seemed to breathe life back into the room. But Walter just listened, never spoke, never cried. This became our new routine. Every evening at 9:47, the same ritual. Margaret's voice, Walter's silence, and me lying between them, watching shoulders that shook with suppressed sobs. Have you ever watched someone drowning in their own strength? Week after week, month after month, neighbors stopped bringing casseroles. Phone calls became less frequent. The world moved on, but Walter remained frozen in that moment when everything ended. He functioned perfectly during daylight hours, maintained the house, tended the garden Margaret had loved, even continued his woodworking. But each evening, he'd return to that chair, to those tapes, to the silence that was eating him alive from the inside. I began to understand something profound about human men. They're taught that tears equal weakness, that strength means standing alone, that grief is something to be conquered rather than felt. Walter was drowning in the very composure everyone admired. 9 months after Margaret's funeral, I got sick. Not the kind of sick that comes with old age and goes away with rest. The kind that settles deep in your bones and doesn't leave. It started with small things, less energy during our walks, food that didn't taste right, sleeping more hours than awake ones. Walter noticed immediately, the way people do when they've spent years learning every detail of something they love. "Come on, old boy," he'd say, helping me onto the couch when my joints protested. He began carrying me upstairs at bedtime, his strong carpenter's arms cradling me like I weighed nothing. The vet was gentle but honest. 12 years is a good run for a golden. Dr. Martinez said, her hand soft on my head. "We can keep him comfortable, but—" Walter nodded, understanding everything she didn't say. That night, instead of sitting in his recliner, Walter brought pillows down to the living room floor and lay beside me. He stroked my fur with those hands that had built cabinets and carved toys and held Margaret's hand for 43 years. "I know you're tired, Bruno," he whispered. "I know it hurts." We lay there in the darkness, my head on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady against my ear. And for the first time in 9 months, Walter began to talk. "I don't know how to do this without her," he said to the ceiling. "Everyone expects me to be fine. They say things like, 'She'd want you to be happy, and you're so strong.' But I'm not strong, Bruno. I'm barely holding on." His voice cracked, and I felt something wet drop onto my fur. "I keep thinking if I don't cry, if I don't break down, somehow it means she's not really gone. Like grief is something I can just refuse to feel. But it's killing me, boy. It's eating me alive." More tears came then, 9 months worth spilling onto my golden coat. His body shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his chest, from the very center of who he was. "I miss her voice in the morning. I miss the way she'd hum while cooking. I miss having someone to talk to about the little things. Whether the roses need pruning, if it's going to rain, what we should watch on TV. I miss being half of something whole." He cried for hours that night, and I lay perfectly still, absorbing every tear, every shudder, every broken word. This was my purpose, not just to be his companion in joy, but to witness his pain, to hold space for the grief he'd been carrying alone. "Margaret would laugh at me," he said as dawn light began filtering through the curtains. "She always said real men aren't afraid to cry. She'd tell me tears don't wash away love. They prove it exists." In that moment, something shifted in our house. The suffocating silence cracked open, and Walter began to breathe again. "When was the last time you let yourself feel everything you've been carrying?" Over the following weeks, as my strength ebbed like a tide going out, Walter's emotional walls came down brick by brick. He called his children and actually talked. Not just the surface conversations about weather and work, but real talk about missing their mother, about feeling lost, about being afraid. He joined a grief support group at the community center, something Margaret had suggested months before the accident for their neighbor who'd lost his wife. "I wasn't ready before," he told the group leader. "I thought being strong meant being silent." He learned that grief isn't something to overcome, but something to carry, like love itself. That tears don't diminish a man's strength. They prove his heart is still alive. My final gift to Walter wasn't just my companionship through his darkest hours. It was showing him that love, real, deep love, expresses itself through vulnerability, not silence. I crossed the Rainbow Bridge on a Tuesday morning in December, Walter's arms around me, his tears blessing my passage. But here's what will surprise you. My story doesn't end there. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from beyond the veil. 3 weeks after I was gone, Walter found something that made him sob harder than the day I died. While cleaning out my old blanket, he discovered Margaret's wedding ring. The one she'd removed during her final garden work and forgotten in my bed. I had been guarding it for 9 months, keeping her closest to him in the only way I could. That's when Walter understood. Love doesn't disappear, it just finds new messengers. The next day, he walked into the county animal shelter with a strange request. "I need to see your saddest dog," he told the volunteer. "The one everyone thinks is broken." He came home with Charlie, a 3-legged German shepherd whose military veteran owner had died alone. Charlie hadn't eaten properly in weeks, wouldn't let anyone touch him, spent his days staring at the kennel door waiting for someone who would never return. But Walter saw something else. He saw himself. For the first month, they were two broken souls sharing the same house. Charlie slept by the front door. Walter still sat in his recliner at 9:47 p.m. Neither spoke much, neither cried much. They were perfect in their mutual brokenness. Then something magical happened. One evening, when Margaret's recorded voice was reading her favorite poem about unconditional love, Charlie slowly walked over and placed his head on Walter's lap. For the first time since my passing, Walter's hand moved instinctively to pet fur, to offer comfort. That's when the dam finally burst. Walter cried for Margaret, for me, for Charlie's lost veteran, for all the silent men who think tears are surrender instead of strength. And Charlie, beautiful, broken Charlie, climbed into Walter's lap and let himself be held for the first time since his rescue. Now Walter doesn't just listen to grief support groups. He leads them, with Charlie as his co-therapist. Men who won't open up to humans somehow find words when they're petting a three-legged dog who understands loss. The woodworking shed has become a workshop where fathers and sons build birdhouses together, while talking about things they've never said out loud. The living room where I once watched Walter's silent tears now echoes with the laughter of support group meetings. And here's the most beautiful part. Walter had Margaret's wedding ring made into a pendant that he wears every day. Not as a chain that binds him to the past, but as a compass pointing him toward helping others heal. You see, humans often think strength means standing alone in the storm. But real strength? It's learning to dance in the rain with others who understand your rhythm. From wherever I am now, I watch Walter teach other broken hearts what I learned in those final months. That love multiplies when shared, that tears water the soil where new hope grows, and that sometimes the most healing thing you can do is let someone else's pain remind you that you're not alone. If there's a Walter in your life, a man carrying weight he won't put down, sitting in silence when he should be speaking his heart, don't wait for a crisis to reach out. Sometimes the bravest thing you can say is, I see your pain, and it's okay to feel it. Charlie just walked into the room as I'm telling you this story. He's carrying something in his mouth. A small wooden heart Walter carved with 3 words engraved on it. Love never dies. That's the truth we want you to remember. Love doesn't end with goodbye. It just learns to speak in new languages. Through tears that finally fall, through hands that reach out, through hearts brave enough to break open and let the light back in. Subscribe here and never miss another story that inspires,